Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Thursday, December 5th, 2024. I'm your host, George Kurt, joined by the one and only Cody Roadcap. Cody, this is going to be a great show. There's a lot to talk about heading into the final week of the fantasy regular season, the final bye week of the season. So many things.
Yeah, but we got to keep it moving. We got the best Thursday night game of the year coming up in just over an hour, and we want to talk about that game and a whole bunch more. So let's just, you got to do your part, and we can get right into it.
All right, cool. So make sure you're following us on our socials. We are at the Couch GMs on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. You can always DM us with any questions you have, fantasy or otherwise, or we are live Mondays and Thursdays at 6:30 East. Drop those questions in the comments if you are watching then. All right, Cody, let's just sit back, relax, and chat. I have something just kind of fun to talk about because we saw a lot of people making a waiver rush late in the season for Isaac Guerrero this week. And I'm actually somebody who in the Couch GMs World Cup went out there and grabbed him, just emptied my fab dollars on him and ended up winning my bid, $43 on Isaac Guerrero. But I am eliminated from the playoffs. In our situation, those wins could be big. Obviously, I'm still playing for a wild card berth in the Couch GMs World Cup final. So you never know if that one win's going to make a difference. You still got to play it all the way out. In other redraft leagues where that may not be the case, I'm kind of wondering if that was the right thing to do. We had somebody who actually I saw a post from Reddit. He said one guy's been inactive the entire season in our fantasy league. He is 2-11. They told him they were going to kick him next season, and then he went on and spent his $100 in fab on Guerrero, keeping away from all of the playoff and playoff seeking teams. Do you see a problem with this?
Nope. I do not.
I see more of a problem with him being inactive.
Well, I mean, sure. I don't see a problem. That's a different conversation. But even going back to your point, like, no, you play in a fab league, you get to spend your fab dollars. I know some people get, frustrated when it comes to the recurring waivers, when it goes based on, reverse record each week. And then those teams that are at the bottom are getting the players that don't help the playoff runs. That's why we push people to play fab, because it balances that out. You save your money, you get to spend it. And you mentioned in the Couch GMs World Cup, you won your bid in Group C at $43. But when we compared all three groups, because he was the highest bidder, you were the seventh highest bidder overall. He went for $93 in one of the groups. So, like, it all depends on your league and the amount of money that's left. And props to that guy with, like, one last, stick it to him. Like, you're going to kick me? Well, you're going to have to make do with me picking up the, one of the most coveted players in all of fantasy this season. My only thing is, though, and I said it on Tuesday, I've said it to you guys offline, this Isaac Guerrero thing is starting to feel very similar to Mike Boone a few years playoff. And granted, this was the week getting in, not championship weekend, but I'm starting to, the 49ers are kind of like, seems like after last week, they're kind of just done. And I wonder if this is going to be a guy that everybody rushes to play and then it comes back to bite them. But I'm sure we'll talk about that when we get to that game.
And there's probably a lot of people that are trying to play him that don't have a choice with how many bye weeks and such we have. But before we get to games, why don't we give you what we promised you on Monday with a little bit of a Couch GMs World Cup update?
For sure. And George, while you pull up the graphics, just for any new listeners here, is like, well, you keep mentioning this Couch GMs World Cup. What is it? Well, this is a 4-year in total fantasy football thing, trial experience that we have hosted. There's 30 teams. It's broken up into 3 leagues of 10. And over the course of 3 years, we take cumulative records to put and create the final team, which is the World Cup finals, to face off in year 4 to win the overall championship. Highest win percentage gets qualified. After, if you win your league, you get an automatic qualification in year 4 as well. So that last spot could come down to one team if we have 9 new winners over the course of 3 years, or multiple teams if we have any repeats. And that's what we're going to talk about now, is those final standings as we make our way into week 14 and that final regular season of year 2 of the Couch GMs World Cup.
So let me just hit some little things here. We're going to change our background and we're going to change our look here. Start with Group A. Group A is Tyler's league, so he's not here to talk directly. But when we look at it, Colin's having a year, 11-2, locked into a bye, locked into the 1 seed. He's not going to have to worry about anything in week 14 or in week 15 even. But that bye week position has been shifting around a little bit. Currently, Bree has the advantage. She is winning in for the bye, and she does have the points tiebreaker. That's points 4 that you see in the final column is the first tiebreaker. So good chance she's going to get that second bye regardless of win or loss. But there is a huge drop off in this league still, just like we saw earlier, where that between the 5 and 6 is a pretty big difference. Ryan's made a hell of a run, actually, though, to get back to the 6th seed. Last time we looked at this, I think he was 8th or 9th.
You say that, but 6 through 9 can all make the playoffs right now this week. So it's going to be a very, intense week in Group A.
Well,
and
no, 7 and 8 play each other this week. Figured I would let you know that. So it is going to be either 6, 7, or 8.
Okay, so 7 or 8 do play. So 9 would be eliminated on a technicality because both those teams can't lose.
Yes. And if they tie, they still beat 9.
Right, for sure. But yeah, so I think you'll see this a lot of leagues. You have, the clear front runner. Then you have like 2 people kind of fighting out for a bye week. And then like 2 or 3 people fighting it out for that last spot just to get in. And we've seen numerous times how people just need to get in and then they can go on a run. And it's always tough to based on scoring because some of these teams in the lower tier, like Doug, for example, one of the, bottom 4 lower scoring teams, if he could squeak his way in, his team could just be getting hot at this moment. And so interesting to see how Group A shapes out, but Colin definitely seems like the guy to beat.
Definitely. We're going to do a little switcheroo here, and we're going to switch it up to the Group B graphic, and then I will let you talk, Cody. What do you see in Group B besides you at the top?
Glorious. That's what I see. Me at the top, have a bye locked in. Now, interesting in this one, Reed can go from either the 1 seed or lose out of a bye this week. So Andrew S can sneak into that one. I'm actually pulling up the matchups right now just to see if they happen to play each other. I don't believe they do. They do not. That would have been a fun one to see how that one shapes out. But same thing, I have the bye locked in. It's just which the seed number going to be. Then Reed and Andrew fighting it out for the second bye. Follow that up by some 7 and 6 teams, and then some 6 and 7 teams. So and then Andrew T is also down there, and Josh down there at 5 and 8. Depending on how the schedule breaks down, could potentially sneak into a key spot. But the one name I do want to mention on Group B is number 7, Kempe. Kempe's a World Cup winner in year 1. If he doesn't even make the playoffs this year, we're guaranteed at least one new winner.
Not necessarily, actually, because David is also a winner.
Right. So I guess we're already guaranteed a winner because there's no winner in Group A.
Yes.
So
you have a chance that you might have a 2 in 6 chance of a repeat winner in Group B, which, if you don't know the rules, the champions in the first 3 years automatically move on to the final, and then it opens up wildcard spots. So if there's somebody who wins 2 years, we're opening up more wildcard spots. That's more chaos at the end of next season.
Yeah, and then just looking at because 4 through 7 are basically 1 game apart. We do have David and Brandon are going to play each other, so they're win and get in situation. And then we have Kempe plays Reed, so that's going to be a big win. He needs to pull off the upset to keep his chances alive. And then I'm trying to figure out what team is. I always get the Andrews confused, but Jason, he plays Josh, so he needs that win to stay alive as well, and he has the upper hand there. So it looks like the 6 are set. Doesn't look like, but if there's an upset or something like that, we're gonna get a shakeup in Group B.
Andrew T is the one that's going to be interesting if there's some key losses because he has points on all those guys right above him. It's going to be a long shot, needs a lot of help, but having that tiebreaker makes it interesting.
For sure. Definitely looking to see how this one plays out. And definitely also feel great that I get to, cruise the next 2 weeks in fantasy football, at least when it comes to the Couch GMs World Cup.
It looks like you've closed that point gap a little bit, but Still pretty lucky to be sitting up there at 1, but you get in, you get a bye. You only need 2 weeks for something to happen.
So to your point, yes, I have closed it. My team is hot as of right now, which is always the death kiss right as you enter the fantasy season, but back-to-back 140 plus weeks to help solidify my number one status. So it definitely looked a little sketchy at the beginning. It's still not great, but we'll have to see. And I will say, give a shout out to Group B for being the most active in the trade market. I don't remember exactly the number, but I think we're between 5 and 7 trades on the season in Group B. So one of the more active leagues compared to Group A, which maybe had 1
or 2. And I believe Group C had only 1 or 2 as well. There's a lot of people that play chess when others are playing checkers in Group B. I feel like Kempy has said that multiple times. Andrew S. is that kind of person. You're always active looking for something. So that makes sense.
For sure. Why don't you bring up your group real quick before we head into the games?
Throwing down here. Group C. Not as fun of a time for me here. I'm all the way down to 9th. Bad time. I had a little bit of a comeback until I got snuffed by maybe the surprise of the season. Anthony, who struggled really bad last year. He has been on a run. I believe it's a 3 or a 4 game win streak. He knocked me out officially 2 weeks ago, and he now has a chance at a 1 seed, but he could also fall all the way down to 5, depending on how things fall. He need a lot of points help to fall all the way to 5, but still, this league's tight. No one at double-digit wins yet. Nick started off super hot and has kind of cooled off lately, so I'm kind of interested to see if his team has any issues going into the playoffs. Because of his points, he should still hold a bye, but there's a chance he loses the 1 spot.
But
this league is pretty wide open. What was that?
I said Nick plays you, so he should feel pretty good.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot going on in George's fantasy team land this week, if we're being honest. It's Jordan Love is a chance to start off hot and make it interesting, but that's probably the best thing I've got going.
Great. Not feeling good about the Packers' chances now that I hear that you're starting Jordan Love this week. But looking at these matchups, Shelby plays Cole. So she's at the 8th seed, but he's currently at the 6th seed. So that could be a big implication one. You mentioned Anthony. He plays Hayden, who's in the 7th seed. So he needs a win to get up in the conversation, where Anthony needs the win to get a bye. Marcus and Jim play each other. So that one is kind of just a seeding position. And then Neil plays Mike, who is at the 3 seed. So if he wants a bye, he needs to beat the number 10 guy as well.
Interesting things to look at this week. This league's super tight. We'll see how it falls in. The returning champion in this league is Shelby. So if she makes the playoffs, could make things a little interesting if she can go on a run. She's already actually had a decent comeback too. She was in the 10 spot for probably the first half of the season, and it slowly just crawled her way back.
Yeah, have to wait and see. She's definitely no slouch when it comes to fantasy, but that's what makes it so interesting is, you have one good year, you can have one bad year, but how do you do over the course of multiple years? And that's what our goal is, try to find out. And we'll be doing more of these updates now, and we'll let you know who makes the playoffs and the playoffs reactions as we get going. But George, I know there's some bye weeks, so we had a little extra time, but are you ready to do a little preview of these games?
Yes, sir. Let's do it. Buymageddon 2.0 is upon us. Let's switch our background back. I'm sorry. I didn't do that one for you. My bad. 6 teams on bye: Ravens, Broncos, Texans, Colts, Patriots, Commanders. There is a whole laundry list of players we're trying to replace this week and look at injuries and everything else. Let's just jump right into the Sunday early window. We're looking at Browns at Steelers, a great divisional matchup. That was a great game on primetime a few weeks ago. Biggest injury news here: Cedric Tillman, who's somebody who really liked after the Jameis Winston switch, is still in concussion protocol, still has not participated, does not look like he's going to go this week. So that turns me to the other Browns wide receivers as we try to look for people to fill some buys. And somebody you might have gotten off the waiver wire in the last few weeks is Jerry Jeudy. Do you like it?
I think Right, like it's a tough matchup. You don't expect a lot of scoring in this one. You don't expect the shootout that they had against the Broncos last week, although very good defense. But Jerry Jeudy seems to be Jameis Winston's go-to target. They have a connection going, especially over the last 5 weeks. Even when Tim was in there, Jerry Jeudy started to get more involved. He won't have his, two big home run touchdowns that he had last week, the 30-some point performance in most leagues. But I do think with all the bye weeks, I don't know how Jerry Jeudy isn't in your bench unless somehow you don't have a bye.
Yes, I agree with that just because of how good it's been. And in tough matchups over the last few weeks, Jameis Winston, obviously, still throwing pick sixes, just how Jameis Winston is. But against the number one passing defense in the league, threw for almost 500 yards and 4 touchdowns, 6 if you count the pick sixes. It's crazy.
Yeah. He's gonna push the ball downfield, and Jerry Jeudy has been the recipient of that. And David Njoku has been getting involved as well too. If you need a tight end play,
Someone who's probably been starting to scoot back up in some leagues. Some people held on strong, and if you did, good hold there. He's been somebody who can play week in and week out at this point.
awesome. All right, we got a question in the chat from Steven, and one of his players involves George Pickens, so we can talk about that right now. But he's in a PPR league, and he's trying to figure out his 2 flex spots. His options are Jacobs, Pickens, McConkey, Harris, which I assume is Najee Harris, Jennings, which I assume is Dewan Jennings, and Rico Dowdle. Are you starting anyone over Jacobs or Pickens? And for me, Jacobs is a lock in your lineup, especially how he's performing over the last 5 weeks or so after the Packers came off their bye. The only question for me is, you say Pickens, I might say McConkey. The way he's been playing over the last couple of weeks is kind of where I'm leaning. I know he was a little bit banged up, and him being on Sunday night though would be a concern too without the injury report. But see what his final designation is tomorrow. I think if he is off the injury report and good to go with that shoulder, then definitely I would go McConkey over Pickens. But I do understand that Pickens is playing well now that Russell Wilson is there. Any other guy you're throwing in the mix?
No, I was going to also say it's kind of a coin flip for me between Pickens and McConkey. If you have any uncertainty about McConkey going into Sunday Night Football, play Pickens, just play it safe.
And then he also threw in there, he also with Lamar Jackson on bye week, what QB waiver pickup would you start this week? Geno Smith, Russell Wilson, Caleb Williams, or Matt Stafford?
Been throwing all these guys around in all different situations here. The best on the season so far, and the person I feel like I've been leaning to the most, has been Geno Smith. It's not exactly a I love it play, but I think that's where I'm leaning.
Yeah, the name that interests me is Caleb Williams, just because of him being more efficient and using his legs more over the last couple of weeks. He had a really good game last week. He starts off slow, but then they pick up and they get behind and he has to throw it. But because he also asked about Pickens, I just curious your thoughts. If he goes Russell Wilson, do you like putting the stack in that case?
I think I do. I think that's something to think about. And they scored some points on the Browns last game, and it was in the snow. Sometimes these 2 games in 3 weeks familiarity means it's going to be a blowout because I feel like it normally tends to favor the offense. The defense doesn't have as much of a surprise because the offense has seen it recently. So I don't hate the idea of going with Russell Wilson then throwing in Pickens.
And then Marcus is in the chat throwing in some extra as a potential waiver wire person. Maybe he's not there, and we're going to talk about this game more on Monday, but we'll hit it a little bit. Cooper Rush, I said it on Monday. I think he's a great waiver wire pick. I even joked about it. It's going to be crazy how many people have a chance to, make the playoffs on the back of Cooper Rush, but he goes against the Cincinnati Bengals on Monday Night Football. That defense is atrocious. They lost Logan Wilson. They've lost their captain in the middle. They're banged up. They're on the brink of checking out for this season as well, too. So if Cooper Rush is available, I think I'd actually play him over all the other 4 guys listed.
It's just a situation where there's a lot of quarterbacks and their matchups are okay, but there's so many good games that I'm really struggling to find the guys I love. So you can probably end up playing any of them and being fine. Cooper Rush is probably the least talented of the group you said, but he's in the best matchup. So it's still a toss up.
Yeah. So, but other ones you said, I think the conversation is between Caleb and Russell. And if you play Russell, go ahead and stack him with Pickens. If you go Caleb, then I would play McConkey there. And I tend to lean the Williams McConkey route myself. George,
I would
what would your
probably lean Russ and Pickens.
so George is Russ and Pickens. So unfortunately, we are split there. But I think either way, you'll have a successful weekend with either of those two guys there. But let's get back to the games. Saints at the Giants in wow, this game's gonna be rough.
Well, the Giants, I believe, are starting Drew Lock again. We don't know the status on Tommy DeVito yet. Malik Neighbors limited participant in practice. Looks like he's going to go, but he just hasn't quite been the same despite getting the targets over the last month and a half.
He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 3 or maybe week 4, but it was one of those early weeks.
Like back when he was still a top 10, top 5 wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you're probably not relying on Malik Neighbors, and there's probably some options out there. Like I'd play Jerry Jeudy over Malik Neighbors. At this point, I'd play McConkey over, Malik Neighbors. So I know it's a pretty good matchup on the Saints side. No Taysom Hill. We talked about that on Monday, but he is out for the season, and he was kind of the guy that you would play on that Saints offense because I mean, obviously Kamara you'll throw in your lineup, but not a lot of great options there for me though. The question is Tyron Tracy. He's been explosive, but he's also been a little sketchy the last couple weeks. He sneaked away with a couple touchdowns. What are your thoughts on Tracy?
I like Tracy, especially in a matchup where you don't think they're going to really fall behind. And he's just been solid. I'm not expecting him to go out there and score me 20, but especially in a week like this, those guys that can score you 8 to 10 points, you hope they score a touchdown, are invaluable. And that's where I kind of have him. The other guy in this matchup I don't want you to overlook just because I feel like we've been kind of mentioning him, but not in passing. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, if you're desperate for a wide receiver play, do you go out there and take the home run hitter?
I'm still not doing it, but to each their own. I was actually going to ask you, do you chase another tight end in like a Juwan Johnson or something like that? Or because of how involved other ways Taysom Hill was, you're not going to look for him at that position?
The thing is, I think there's still 2 of them. So you don't really know which of the 2. Somebody's got to catch the ball. So you're trying to find who the guy is, but there's definitely no clue as to who that guy is going to be. So you can go out there and get Juwan Jennings and or Juwan Johnson and hope, but you're running the major risk you're going to throw up a 0.
I like it. I don't think I would play tight end either, but you're the Saints tight end guy, so I had to ask.
I'm a Taysom Hill guy. The other tight ends never.
That's right. George says play Cole Kmet always.
Never.
All right, next game. Jets Dolphins.
Big news here. Breece Hall has not participated in practice yet this week, knee injury, but they are optimistic that he's going to go. You're probably going to have to play him if he does go, but I don't love it.
I mean, you almost want him not to go, right? Like,
kind of do.
I mean, because at this point, if you've had Breece Hall, if you're fighting for a playoff spot, it's not because of Breece Hall.
It's true.
So, like, he's not the first round guy that we wanted, that we thought could potentially be the number 1 running back on the year. The Jets defense has been not great since the let go of Robert Saleh. That doesn't really matter because we're talking about a Jets running back. Completely whiffed on the team I was saying. The Dolphins, on the other hand, they're a little bit banged up, but they were able to slow down Josh Jacobs through the run game last week, but they allowed him to eat him up in the pass game. That could be the most exciting part for a Breece Hall owner. But let me ask you this, and I think this will answer your question if you play Breece Hall banged up. If he doesn't go, do you trust Braylon Allen? Are you that low on the Jets offense?
I only trust him if I'm in a situation where I'm trying desperately to find a fill. Like if I'm somebody who has one of my starting running backs on bye, missed out on Garendo in the waiver wire market, my next best option is one of those handcuffs. Like then I'm going with it. But I'm not putting him over any starting running back that I can think of.
Okay. Interesting. And then on the Jets receiving side, like, do you still play? Like I benched Devonta Adams last week. He had a better week last week, but do you still roll out both Devonta Adams and Garrett Wilson?
If you have been, I think you do. If they're kind of your rolling flex and you don't have buy problems, I'm not. I've been in a situation where I do have Adams in one league, and I don't think he's sniffed my lineup besides maybe that week 12 by Mageddon for a while now. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, it was wild. Last week in one league, I was benching Devonta Adams, and the other I was benching Deebo Samuel, and I was just like, man, did not expect this.
I
Healthy
enjoyed
scratches.
not having those bye weeks and seeing how scores were higher, lineups were easier, and now we're sitting here again like, we're going through this one more time.
Yeah, and this is the week too, because you're going to have to make sure you hit on the guys that you play.
Yep.
On the Dolphins side, the question mark is always Jalen Waddle. And with bye weeks, I feel like, yeah, he's in your lineup because there's probably not other options out there. But he is the question mark. Tyreek Hill's been getting more involved. He even caught that fluky touchdown at the end of Thanksgiving game. And then Devon Achane and Johnny Smith, they are featuring him a lot. He is the second most targets over the last 3 weeks in all of football. So keep him in your lineup.
I think that's a good way to put it right there, Cody. It's nice to see a little bit of the resurgence of Tyreek Hill happening lately. I mean, he caught a deflection touchdown last week on Thanksgiving night, but we'll take what we can get, and hopefully he's starting to come back into form for those that have him in a fantasy playoff situation.
For sure. Let's talk about the next game. I don't want to.
No,
It's
me neither.
ugly. Jaguars, Titans.
It's
I
very
got
ugly.
nothing.
The biggest thing is when you're trying to fill bye weeks, there's two Titans wide receivers that are kind of borderline ownable at this point that people are saying like they could have a big game. The Jaguars aren't good. So it's Calvin Ridley, who's probably more owned. If you have him on your bench, he's somebody who you could put in, but you're really playing boomer bust. And then the true boomer bust, who's only been booming lately, is Nick Westbrook-Akine. And I know you hate him, but it seems like you really are trying to stay away from those guys who are just home run hitters. And I understand it because you're playing major risk, but the man's on a ridiculous touchdown streak and he's in a good matchup.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great way to put it. Like in this matchup alone, it's not the best. Would I rather have Nick Westbrook-Akine, who has been, 20 catches on the season, but 8 of those have went for tutties? Or do I want Brian Robinson Jr., who has been up and down, a little bit better last week, but 2 weeks in a row prior to that was not great, has a backup quarterback, Mac Jones again. Which one? For me,
I'd
I'm
rather
still
play
going to
Brian Thomas.
Okay, I'm still there with that
Yeah.
one. Obviously, because he's shown some of the higher
Mhm.
upside, but let's take it down a step further. Maybe you are Nick Westbrook-Akine, or assuming in our next matchup, assuming Darnell Mooney goes.
I'm probably taking what I would consider the safer play and going Darnell Mooney. But then with bye weeks, you could be going down even more.
So this is where I think you can also, get into it with fantasy football. So when we looked at the Couch GMs World Cup, right? There's some teams down there that they are, they need to win, a loss, and heck, they might even need some points.
Yeah.
And if you're out in that situation, you don't got time to be safe. You got to roll out Nick Westbrook-Akine and take the swings. Hope he gets another 2 tutties, and that extra 6 points is the difference maker as you're trying to chase someone for points. So I think too, like, look at your league. Like some of you are going to be in the situation where you're in and you just need, you're playing for seeding, maybe a chance at a bye. Maybe you go a little bit with the safer options that we mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
If you need to win, go ahead and take the flyer. Take a flyer on tonight. We talked about this a little bit off air. Christian Watson, another great example. 2 weeks ago against Chicago, 4 catches, 150-ish yards, and a touchdown. Last week, 2 catches. Like, what do you get? So that's always the high upside with those kind of guys. I'm not doing the Nick Westbrook-Akine. But you might be in a situation where you just need points, and he's shown that he's a big play guy, and Will Levis does like to throw it deep.
I'm surprised Marcus disappeared from the chat. He's actually playing Nick Westbrook-Akine against me. So I thought he would come to bat for him a little bit. But this also goes on the flip side. If you're a team that's locked in, not really playing for anything this week, and you have a bench full of bye weeks, and you're in a situation where it's like, do I want to drop somebody who could be valuable to fill a roster? Don't fill a roster. If it's a situation where you end up playing Aaron Jones and Cam Akers, play Aaron Jones and Cam Akers. Like, don't drop somebody who could be valuable for you just because you're trying to fill an active roster for your for a week that's not going to matter for you. If the week matters for you, that's a big difference.
Right. To that same sense, though, be careful of what your league rules, how serious they take inactive rosters, and just because your bestest buddy isn't in, but the guy you're playing, or if you're playing him and he needs to win to get in, don't set your worst lineup or inactives just because you're safe. But like to George's point, if your whole team's on bye and you're not going to play a kicker or you're not going to play your defense this week because you don't want to end up dropping Michael Pittman, Zay Flowers, Bo Nix, or Nico Collins because they're all on bye and you just need people, don't do it.
Exactly. That's exactly where I'm coming from. No collusion. Just play what's best for your team for the long run.
For sure. All right. Maybe the best game of the 1 o'clock window, at least on the East Coast. Or maybe I'm just trying to make something out of this pretty mediocre slate. That is the Kirk Cousins revenge game as he and the Atlanta Falcons come back to the Minnesota Vikings. Kirk is coming off one of his worst games of the season against the Chargers. It's a homecoming game. He knows how to win in US Bank Stadium. Can he upset the Minnesota Vikings, who are fighting for everything as they try to keep pace with, especially if Detroit wins tonight, they're going to want to keep pace for that. Or if Green Bay wins, they're now tied for the division lead. So they have a lot to fight for.
They do. And at the same time, their offense looks sluggish. There's weeks where their running game just disappears. Justin Jefferson hasn't been quite on the same level that we're used to seeing him. And you can say the same thing on the Falcons side. Like, they've been very inconsistent on the offensive side of the ball too. If you told me this game ends up 13-10, I'd be like, yeah, not shocked. Don't know who you'd say would win that, but it's the Vikings are winning with defense right now. And it's concerning when you're somebody who's relying on Justin Jefferson, Aaron Jones, but you're not going to take him out of your lineup.
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to take him out of your lineup, just like you're not taking Bijan out of your lineup. You're not taking Drake London out of your lineup. And you're probably not taking Kyle Pitts because, tight ends are tight ends. But yeah. So you're playing those guys and you're hoping that this game is 35-31. But to George's point, it has just, as much likelihood of being that as it does being 13-10. But we don't talk kickers a lot.
No.
Your boy, Young Hoku, has had a rough last couple of weeks. So just another reason why kickers shouldn't be in fantasy football.
Yeah, no, you're going to drop him and pick up like John Parker Romo or something, right?
Yeah, but I also saw that they designated their kicker Reichard to return. So I don't know if that'll be this week or not. But that could be something interesting. The guy that hasn't missed yet gets cut for the guy that used to be their kicker, who was actually doing really good. So some kicker drama in Minnesota, but that's enough to talk for this podcast is lifetime.
I was going to say for this season, but Cody taking it a step further. Kickers may or may not belong in fantasy. We're going to argue it later. Panthers at Eagles. No really
Trap
big
game.
Notes. It honestly could be, if we're being honest. No real big news here except for Devontae Smith, full participant in practice. If you're in bye week problems and have him sitting on the bench, looks like you can put him back in and let it roll.
Yeah, I like that as well. And I think you have to be careful playing any Panthers this week. I know Chuba had the fumble last week, but he's been a big part of their offense, but they are starting to get Jordan Brooks more involved. This Eagles front is very good. So I'm treating the Panthers as a bye team this week, essentially. So there's 7 teams on bye in my head.
I mean, that's not a bad way to put it. You might have to play Chuba. He would be the one that I would consider if you're desperate, but he's knocked way down your rankings compared to where he's been. the people out here trying to grasp at straws for Xavier Legette or Adam Thielen, I think you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, I agree. And if you're forced to pick between those two, maybe we'll just say you're in a 16 team double flex league, trying to think how I would get down there. But then, yeah, you could play Adam Thielen in that situation.
I would rather you say dynasty because that sounds better than playing in 16 league double flex. That gives me a headache. 16 teams double flex. It's probably 3 receivers too, if we're being honest, right?
It'd be wild if it was 16 teams double flex, one of them being super flex. So then all 32 quarterbacks could be active on non-bye. Like last week when there was no buys, all 32 starting quarterbacks could have been playing.
There becomes a point where quarterback 28, 29, 30 are not as valuable as whatever wide receiver running back you can throw in that spot.
That's an interesting experiment. Have to look into that for next year.
Next year on the Couch GMs podcast, let's make the most ridiculous league we can think of.
I like that. I like that idea. We should run one ridiculous league just for fun, get some fans involved. Okay. Maybe it'll be 16 team double flex. Maybe it'll be a team where if you beat them, you get to pick a player. If you got a crazy idea,
that's a good one.
If you got a crazy idea, let us know on social or drop them in the comments.
Cool. I like it. One more in the 1 o'clock window. Raiders at Buccaneers. Mike Evans owners, not good news. He's back to it, did not participate in practice. I was trying to look at his statuses last week just to see how it compared. He was limited the entire week last week. So this is a downgrade and concerning to see if he's going to go or
not. Was this just because I know sometimes they're picky, especially when they have them West Coast teams like the Raiders. Was this a DNP Thursday as well?
Yes, this was a DNP Thursday, and they're noting it as his hamstring again.
Okay, so that is definitely an eye for concern as the Buccaneers make a playoff push, and you might have to pivot off of that. But if he goes, I would think that I would play Mike Evans still.
If he doesn't go, does that open up Sterling Shepard as a possibility, or I'm trying to think of the other guys we were playing in that?
In bye weeks, I think, yeah, Sterling Shepard could be a potential option.
Okay. So just places you can pivot if you end up having.
All right. And in that situation as well, this is where you can get crazy too. Like if you're playing someone that has Mike Evans, maybe you go pick up Sterling Shepard if you have it's hard on these super bye weeks, but definitely a person that might want to steal from your opponent if you can.
Raiders side of the ball.
Who cares? Buy team number 8.
Essentially. I mean, Jacoby Myers is a little banged up. He's honestly been better than Cody's been given credit for. I feel like I've mentioned him every week, and Cody's like, no. But he's actually at over 10 half PPR points in 4 straight weeks. Not loving it in this matchup, but somebody you can play if you're desperate. Their running back room is going to be a mess. So not touching any of them. Sorry, Sincere, McCormick, waiver wire winners.
Brock Bowers is definitely in your lineup. That was disrespectful for the rookie of the year.
See, we're going to keep pounding the table for Brock Bowers rookie of the year. It's never going to happen, but we're going to try.
Yeah, and Jacoby Myers, he's a fine play. He gets the second amount of targets on that team. So he's a fine play as well if you're desperate.
Cool. Hitting the late window?
Let's do it.
All right. Seahawks at Cardinals. This is another matchup of teams that played 2 weeks ago. Like I said earlier, I think this favors the offense in this case. So I think we're firing everybody up. It's been a tough go for Marvin Harrison. It was good to see him get in the end zone last week. They are trying to say they're trying to get him more involved in the offense. So anybody who's kind of been in and out on him, I think you have to keep him in your lineup, especially this week.
Yeah, I like that. And honestly, both these teams, you're playing DK, JSN, you're playing Connor, Marvin Harrison Jr., you're playing Ken Walker, you're playing your guys, you're playing Kyler Murray, you're playing Geno Smith if you need to. Like this should be a good game. A lot of fun. And hopefully the Cardinals don't completely fall apart like they did in week 1 against the Buffalo Bills and then last week against the Minnesota Vikings.
Anything else to mention here? I think we're good.
No, let's keep this moving.
Cool. All right. Bears at 49ers. This one's interesting. Obviously, looking at the 49ers running back room, CMC to injured reserve, Jordan Mason injured reserve, both likely done for the season. Cody, not a big fan of Garendo, but he's going to get the opportunities. You can put him in your lineup. You're hoping for the best. You're hoping this is not a Mike Boone situation.
Yeah, I mean, he might get the opportunities, but they can't move the ball. Like, the Bears are also the number one team in the red zone, which concerns you. I mean, the 49ers might not have Trent Williams again on the left side. They might not have Aaron Banks on the left side. Like, there was a lot of fab spent for him, and I get it. If I want him, he's in my lineup. I paid up for him. But I just have a lot of concern playing him in this matchup, because I do think the 49ers are kind of done for the season. Now, they still have a chance to win their division, and they get to go home to sunny California and not have to play in cold Green Bay or snowy Buffalo this week. So maybe they'll look a little bit more like they have a little bit more life in them. Maybe they get Deebo Samuel going, but I told you I benched him last week. Even in bye weeks, I'm not putting Deebo Samuel back out there. He has like 4 targets he's averaging like 2 targets a game over the last 4 weeks. Like, unless, the only bright spot if you do own Deebo Samuel is maybe he becomes the running back, right? Like, that wouldn't be completely out of the realm of
Or
possibilities.
at least gets a couple of carries, which hasn't happened as much this year.
But that still doesn't mean I'm going to trust him. So really, it's Kittle and Garendo for me, and I don't even really love playing Brock Purdy because you can tell he's banged up with the injuries are starting to mount up for him too.
Jennings, the guy who's actually been getting the most targets besides maybe Kittle.
But like, he hasn't done much. Like, he was at the beginning, but he's getting like 4 targets, but they're not resulting in touchdowns over the last couple weeks too. So that's what I'm saying. Like, this whole San Francisco team is like not the team we thought they were going to be. You can tell that the multiple deep playoff runs have started to catch up to them. They're slowing down. They're banged up. They're injured. And they're not the high-powered offense that we expect a lot of points from. So I'm trying to limit the amount of people I'm playing from that team as much as possible.
I like it. It's tough because there's a lot of names on there, or there's a lot of opportunity on there, but I would definitely tread with caution. Bears side of the ball. DJ Moore has not participated in practice yet this week. He has a quad injury that kind of popped up out of nowhere. He finished the game last week, had a solid game, didn't seem like anything was wrong, and now he hasn't practiced yet. A lot of doubt on that one. How do you attack the wide receiver room, either with Moore being active or without?
With Moore being, it's tough because if he doesn't practice and he still plays, you'd have to imagine he's on some sort of snap count. So hopefully he doesn't go to not murky the water as much, but let's say he does. I still think he could be in your lineup, just not as high expectancy as he would be. If he doesn't go, I actually like Rome Odunze to be the more of the down to down kind of target guy. But I do think that opens up Keenan Allen in the red zone specifically. And I think they would both be an interesting play. But I would take the risk on the Odunze over Allen, especially Allen coming off of 2 touchdowns last week, probably regress to no touchdowns this week.
Yeah, I'm thinking if we get good news on Moore, he's at least a limited participant Friday and looks like he's going to go. I think you're rolling with Moore, and that's probably it. If it looks like Moore's not going to go, I like Odunze better than Keenan Allen, but there's a chance you can roll both.
Yeah. I'm just looking at this Sunday late window, and like it might be the most boring 4 hours of red zone.
Well, yeah, because Bears 49ers would have had a lot more luster if this was near the beginning of the season, before the Niners collapsed, back when the Bears looked like a really solid team. That Seahawks Cardinals game is fantastic. I mean, that's for a division lead at this point.
Yeah, but
and then
probably be low scoring.
Yeah, it will probably be low scoring.
Red zone specifically will be more.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it won't be good games, but it'll be a lot of watching teams play from midfield.
It's true. You might not see that as much, at least on one side of the ball, in Bills at Rams. Thinking the Bills should handle this game, but you never really know. The Rams are a feisty team.
Rams are feisty. Bills have the Lions next week in a big
trap
matchup.
Game?
I don't know if you can call it a trap game. They got to play the 49ers in the snow.
Yeah, fair.
So like it wasn't like a big game prior to that. They did clinch their division. though, so they're already guaranteed a home playoff match. So luckily they're still fighting for the number 1 seed. They're one game behind the Chiefs with the tiebreaker, so they want to get that as much as possible. But I think this is a good game. But in terms of fantasy, Puka, Cup, they're in your lineup. James Cook,
even though that's been kind of inconsistent.
One of them's been good. That's kind of they haven't been the consistent both being dominant, but 1 week it's a Cup week, 1 week it's a Puka week.
Yep.
And so you're playing both of them because they both get targets. Kyron's still in your lineup, even though he has fallen off a little bit over the second half of the season. Then Josh Allen, James Cook.
Wide receiver room, Keon Coleman's still questionable. We don't know if he's going to go or not. Amari Cooper's looking good. He's a full participant. Are any of those guys you're playing? I guess Shakur gets thrown in that conversation too because he's kind of been there, but not highly there.
If you need somebody, sure, go with Amari Cooper. Indoors on a track, a place he's played before. I think he could have a big, kind of breakout game. I think that'd be good for them. But I'm not chasing any of the Bills wide receiver because they're too hard to go. But I understand the buys are tough this week.
Alrighty. Sunday night football is the team you mentioned in the last matchup, the Chiefs hosting the Chargers divisional game here. See if the Chargers can keep just rolling, playing solid football. When it comes to like a team in fantasy, they're kind of frustrating, but they should put up a fight to the Chiefs with how things have been going.
Definitely. And I think this game will go right down to the wire, but I don't think I
don't think any Chiefs game hasn't.
So this game will be an homage to 80s football where you just watch Pacheco and Gus Edwards and Vidal and Kareem Hunt, if you want to throw them in there, just take handoff after handoff. These teams go back and forth. We finish in a 17-13 game. Patrick Mahomes has barely 200 yards. Justin Herbert has barely 200 yards. But both teams, it makes it interesting because it'll be long drives, limited possessions. And I think this is an underrated game of the week and potentially the best game of the week.
Divisional,
if you like that
has
kind of
playoff
football.
Implications. If you like grinded out football, and now we say this, and all of a sudden we're going to see Mahomes
40, 45,
throw for 3 touchdowns, and they'll be like, "Where did this come from?" I mean, I doubt it, but it's going to happen because we're talking about it the other way.
For sure. But with the Chargers, what are your thoughts on the running back? J.K. Dobbins hit IR. Everyone thought that meant Gus Edwards going to step right in there. They looked to be in a full-on split with their rookie Vidal, but it was not great output for either of them. Do you think that means more rookie, or does that mean more veteran?
I think it means more rookie, but I think we're in the dreaded running back by committee where you don't want to play any of them. I compare this more to how the Cowboys running back situation has been this year, more than, like a Lions situation where you can have a chance to play both. Like, I wouldn't touch either of them.
Awesome. I like that. And then, so really on the Chargers side, who are you playing then? If you're not touching the running backs, the wide receiver, I guess you're playing
Ladner. If he goes, like he's fine.
If he goes.
And then there's a couple situations where I think Herbert's fine as well. There's a couple situations where I'm forced to play Quentin Johnston. Don't love it. He has kind of had problems with drops over the last few weeks. You just hope the targets are there. But bye weeks, man. Bye weeks.
They're always tough. On the Chiefs side, Pacheco, I don't love Mahomes because he just hasn't put up the amount of points, but you're probably playing him. Justin Watson is a tight end if you need one. That has been I guess he's technically a
wide receiver. Yes.
But he's
you're thinking Noah Gray.
I always get those two mixed up.
Yep. You're thinking Noah Gray, who
as soon as I said Watson, I was like, that doesn't sound right. And then I said tight end. No, Noah Gray would be the tight end that you might want to play this week because he's had some really two good back-to-back weeks. But we know T Swift's going to be in attendance Sunday Night Football. How could she miss that opportunity? So could be a big game for Travis Kelce.
Yeah, exactly. But there's still a chance that Gray gets going just because their wide receivers have not been consistent. So Mahomes needs to throw the ball somewhere. Gray's been the guy. At any other position, I'd be like, you're not touching Noah Gray. But at tight end, take your shot. Go for it.
For sure. I definitely think that one is worth mentioning. Why don't we talk real quick Monday Night Football? We'll talk more about that on Monday. Bengals, Cowboys. The Bengals are really banged up. I know Jamar Chase didn't. He was limited with an ankle injury, so that's definitely scary as you go into Monday Night Football. But this game will also feature a simulcast of The Simpsons. That's pretty exciting.
That's exciting. The fact that there's a chance that both offenses score 30 plus points is exciting. The fact that this is going to be the last game of the fantasy regular season is exciting. I feel like we're going to go into Monday with a lot of unfinished business in fantasy. Seeing a game with two defenses who can give up points, or at least like the Cowboys defense might be slightly more sound than the Bengals, but the Bengals offense is fantastic. Like this is going to make for an interesting show Monday, if I had to ask me.
No, I completely agree. I think this would be a fun game, a bad game, but it'll be a fun game back and forth. But it is kind of surprising to me. Like we don't talk about like awards, player of the month and stuff like that. Saquon, surprise, surprise, won NFC Offensive Player of the Month. Joe Burrow won AFC Player of the Month this past week, and the Bengals have barely won a game. Like because he's been balling out, having MVP like season, he just can't get the wins to put him in the conversation.
I was going to say that if they were winning games and they had a defense that could at least sniff like middle of the pack, there's a good chance Burrow would be an MVP talk. He's been having a fantastic year.
Yeah, he's going to look real good with Ben Johnson as his head coach next year.
He's going to look good with anybody who can build a defense next year.
Ben Johnson don't need it. He's going to have him scoring 100 points.
Now, that's a little bit ridiculous, but it's possible, man.
Maybe that's just me wanting Ben Johnson off the Lions.
That would be true, but we'll see what happens with that one. I know there's a game you want to talk about, so why don't we take a deep dive into Thursday Night Football? Packers at Lions. No worries about the weather in this one as they're playing in Detroit in the Dome, but this game, big implications for the number one seed and for the NFC North. A lot to look at in this one, Cody.
Yeah, definitely. So in terms like the Packers, if they want any shot at still winning the division, they have to win this game. According to the New York Times simulator, if they lose this game, they still have a 99% chance to make the wild card. So not in terms of playoff implications so much, but in terms of winning the division, they would need a chance. Eagles fans are rooting for them because that would put them tied. Yep. Then you have the Vikings fans rooting for the Packers in that weird situation where they need them because the Lions have the Packers and the Bills next week, so they can't be looking ahead. They'll have the extra rest, but that is a big matchup as well. And this is the part of the season, and they're super banged up, especially on the defensive side of the ball, which could be a good sign for Josh Jacobs, could be a good sign for some of the other Packers weapons. But I think this game will be a gritty, back and forth, good old NFC North battle, some trick plays. It'll be a lot of fun. Probably the best Thursday night game we'll get all year.
Especially because this is a Thursday night game with both teams coming on full rest because both played on Thanksgiving last week. So the unusual Thursday night game not playing on a short week should be beneficial for both teams.
Yeah, I think it's a smart way the league has kind of done that over the last couple of years is giving them double up on Thursday night, but giving them the full week, limiting the amount of people that are playing on Thursdays. I just think it's been a good situation overall. But we got a comment in here to kind of help kick us off this game, which I love because I think Bree wants my advice because it is your wife. Yes. In the comments asking Christian Watson or Jameson Williams in this game has to play. I'm going to just assume this is her World Cup team. It's probably not, but I'm going to assume it is because that'll make it even more full circle for the podcast here. But because she asked the chat and not the guy she shares a bed with, I think she wants my advice, and that would have to be Jameson Williams in this one. The Packers are banged up at corner. No Jair Alexander in this one. He is on the inactive list. We talked about it. Christian Watson had a really good game last year against the Detroit, or almost at the Pistons. Funny. Against the Lions on Thanksgiving Day. That was kind of his breakout game before he got the hamstring injury last year. So he's done it before, but Jameson Williams didn't play the last time these two did with the injuries in the secondary, being at home in where it is a little bit faster. I like Jameson Williams in this one. I think he gets more targets as a deep threat than a guy like Christian Watson.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I'm going to take the guy who's been more consistent through the year, despite them both being big play home run hits. And I would also say Jameson Williams.
Yeah, and I think some of that too has to do with Romeo Dobbs is out. He missed last week with a concussion. He's going to miss this week as well. And we kind of saw Jaden Reed got the uptick last week. I still think there's some plays out there for Dontavian Wicks, not in your lineup, but if you want to throw like an anytime scorer bet on it, not telling you what to do, but that might be a nice payday depending on how much you're willing to bet there. But yeah, this in the Lions' defensive injuries, while there is a lot of them, it's mostly up front too. They have two of the best safeties in the league back there to protect the deep play from Christian Watson. So I like Jameson over Watson in this one. Fun fact, in my Dynasty League, I'm playing both, though.
Which Dynasty team is that? Because I know there's one that's not great.
None of them are great.
Yeah, you're right. You're in rebuild in both, actually.
I don't know how to win Dynasty. I just know how to draft.
He drafts the players, and it either doesn't work out in the long term, or they get moved from his team before he gets enough around it to make a difference.
Correct. The joys of Dynasty football.
Yes, it's the perpetual rebuild for some of us out here. Normally you do this to me. I have to do it to you because it's your team here. So you got to give me a score prediction on this Packers-Lions game.
So can I tell you to, once you're done listening to the podcast, head over to She Said TV and hear my official prediction if you would like. Can't spoil it for those viewers.
Yes, all right. Okay, fine. If you are holding out on our podcast for the other, I mean, that's fine.
I will give you a tease. How about that?
Okay.
Because I know what the score was in that one. I have the over at 52 points.
I really hope it's the over, seeing as these two teams should air it out. But 52 points is a lot. So I can see it, like there's a lot of situations where this is high scoring and it's still under.
Yeah. So I picked an over. I picked a win. Maybe our background color has something to do with it. But if you want the full prediction, you'll have to go over to Cheese TV.
This teaser over here. Anything else to add into Thursday Night Football before we move to our last segment?
No. I mean, I'm just super excited for this game. It's a weird game because there's a lot on the line, but there's not a lot on the line. And I want to see these two teams fight it out. The last time they played, Jordan Love wasn't healthy. That's another big contributing factor to this one. And the Lions should be one loss down because of their Bears one. Maybe we can make up for that and give it to them this week. But you ready for this last segment?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cha-ching.
Tyler's just as excited for this week as all of us are, so he decided to throw in a double touchdown parlay. We're not talking single touchdowns. We're talking two.
Yeah, and normally he gets our advice, or we all pick a leg, and he is like, "No, guys, I got this." So he put $5 on a double touchdown parlay. Saquon Barkley, 2 touchdowns. Not bold.
No, especially against Carolina. That's expected at this point, I think.
Right. Mike Evans, injured Mike Evans, 2 touchdowns.
That'll probably get voided if we're looking at it in this case, but that's fine.
James Conner against Seattle, 2 touchdowns. Super bold.
Yes.
And then James Cook, 2 touchdowns. Probably that's like medium heat.
Yeah, I think that's medium heat. So we got a lock, a super bold, somewhere in the middle, and one that may get voided. But if he does play, that does concern me a little bit.
Definitely. Because if he does play, he would have to, not be on a snap count. Or maybe just play in the red zone. We'll have to wait and see.
But I could see them playing Mike Evans just in the red zone, if we're being honest.
For sure. Now, this bet, maybe the reason he didn't let us pick it, is plus 68,784. Which means
it's a big one.
$5 to win $3,444.20.
It's a pretty big payday.
If he wins, Couch GMs podcast live from Disney World coming to you soon.
I like it. You said it on air. It has to be true now.
So Tyler doesn't even know that, but we'll have to cash in. If we're back in our basements and our attics on Monday, it did not hit.
Yes, Cody, I like it.
All righty. So shout out to Tyler for making a prediction or a bet, even though he couldn't make the show. He'll be back on with us soon. But George, before we hop out of here, any last words for week 14?
Good luck in all your fantasy leagues. I know that we are in a major situation with bye weeks and injuries and everything else. So if you have any other questions that pop up after the show, make sure you hit our DMs. We'll help you out the best we can. Here's to all of our crazy playoff predictions hitting or crazy playoff scenarios hitting. And we'll be live next week to talk again about setting our lineup without bye weeks.
For sure. And like George mentioned, this week is just to get in. But there's still 3 weeks of fantasy playoffs left. And we're going to be here to walk you through that. We're even be here for those week 18ers that like to play in the fantasy championship. So make sure you're locked into the Couch GMs podcast on Mondays and Thursdays live at 6:30 in your feed the next morning. If you've got questions between now and game time, hit us up on social media at the Couch GMs, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, all those good places. I'm Cody Roadcap. That's George Kurth. We'll talk to you Monday, and go Pack Go.